if it's more, wait,
Even if what is more?
even if there are
More QRSs than Ps? Or more
Yeah.
Ps than QRSs?
more P's and QRSs?
Doesn't matter. If there's more Ps and QRSs, then something is blocking the signal from the P wave to the QRS.
But it couldn't just be the refractory
Flutter?
period? Like you
Oh, it
said,
absolutely could.
is that considered a block?
Something is not allowing that signal to regularly get through like it's supposed to. What do we know? What do we know about the refractory periods of, in a normal heart, what do we know about all refractory periods from the first cell to all the subsequent cells?
They go from the epi to the endo?
Okay, that's in the ventricles.
They're delayed?
Can you repeat your question?
Yes. This cell fires, that'll eventually lead to that cell firing, right? As it goes down through. Which one should end its refractory period first? This is not, I'm not talking about the ventricles now, I'm talking about just generally.
The
speaking.
top one.
The top one.
The top one should end its refractory period first and fire first. Does that make sense? Okay. If I take this cell out of the body and hang it out here and just see what's going to happen to it, and I take this cell out of the body and hang it out here and see what happens to it, what will my timing of depolarization to repolarization be in these two cells?
The same.
It should be the same. So therefore, by the time this signal is ready to fire again, what should this cell be?
Almost ready to fire.
again.
It should be ready and past its refractory period. Now, if it's not, then you're right, it won't listen to that signal, and therefore there is some problem with it. Something that's blocking it and changing its refractory period from what is normal. And that denotes a problem.
So like that.
So when we say there's a block, we mean that something happened to either that cell's refractory period to make it not listen to the signal was blocked by a refractory period that was changed somehow, or the cell's just dead, and therefore the signal couldn't get past that cell. Could be either one of those. Either way, the signal was blocked from being continued, so we call it a block.
Is the block always at the AV node?
No.
It can't be, okay.
It's not always at the AV node. It's commonly at the AV node, and so we'll talk about that a lot, but it could be blocked in other places too.
Okay.
So a flutter would be considered a block?
No.
Okay. Just was curious.
Flutters do have a block built into it, but not because something's changing with the refractory period, that's something that's changing because of the cycling that it's at. We'll come back to that when we talk about flutter.
So AFib is a block?
AFib has blocks involved in it. It is not, let me change my answer to make it easier. No, it's not a block, because there is no abnormal repolarization process that's happening in the AV node. It's just going off the timing of its normal stuff. And AFib has a whole ton of different activity, and just happens to be whichever one of those gets to the AV node at any given time after it's done with its refractory period. So we don't have a block in AFib. You can, but a person that just has AFib without anything else does not have a block of some sort.
They have multiple signals coming in.
They just have a lot of different signals, and the AV node just has to get through its refractory period, and it's the timing of when it gets the next
So
signal.
that could show some, okay, so maybe not AFib, but something like what you showed us before, couldn't that look like more an abnormal number of P waves before it QRS?
Yes, but I didn't draw P waves. I was very specific when you asked me for that example, and I did not draw P waves. I drew squiggles.
Flutters, or
I
just
didn't
like?
draw flutters either. I
But-
drew
Okay,
squiggles.
all right.
And there's a big difference. I was
Okay.
careful about doing that on purpose, right? Because you are talking about something that you will see,
Okay,
and we'll have to be very specific about when those are.
okay.
If you have P waves that aren't associated with QRS complexes, that's the block, does that mean that the pathology is in the AV node? Or does that mean,
If the QRS was, yeah, if we're missing a QRS, then most commonly the problem is in the AV node, yes. Either the AV node or the bundle of his. Because it's not getting through to the ventricles, right? And it's unlikely that you'll have a block. It does happen, but it's unlikely that you'll have a block in both bundle branches. Does that make sense? So most commonly we can say it's in the AV node or the bundle of his.
I see, yeah.
Because if it's only in one bundle, we'll see we'll be able to see that.
That's when you normally see two, you see an R and R1. Would be
Yes,
one.
don't go there just yet.
Sorry.
Wait,
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
Sorry.
Don't go there just
I-
yet.
I stopped. I stopped. I stopped. I stopped.
Disregard.
I like
Okay.
that.
Sorry, Annalise.
So, if there's an abnormal number of P waves to QRSs, then we say that there is usually an AV block. We'll come back to that later. And then we're looking at the morphology. There's only a few leads that we can do this in, primarily 2, 3, and AVF. We're looking at the morphology of the P wave, and the P wave should be upright in those 3 leads. Where are those 3 leads?
Third.
They're all inferior. Lead 2,
And third.
AVF, and lead 3.
All in.
They're all right here, which means they're all south of the P wave. They're all south of the atria, and the signal is going this way. So therefore, the signal is traveling towards the cameras, therefore it should be upright. Does that make sense?
Okay, reciprocally of that on the other leads that are north of it,
So this one, AVR, should be what?
Down.
It should always be down, always be down. That's correct. AVR should always have an inverted P wave. 2, 3, and AVF should always have an upright P wave. The other ones, the ones over here, the ones all around, might have differing P waves depending on if that signal is going down and forward or down and back. And that's different in all people. It is always going this way, but whether or not someone grew to have their signal go this way versus this way could be different, which is why we only look primarily in those leads.
is one of those ways pathological, typically?
No, not necessarily.
That's just like,
Yeah, that could just be a normal
Regards
variant. That could be a
being
normal variant for them because there's variation within our population. Everybody's not the same. Everybody's different. With some regularity to what we're doing.
So in AVL, if the signal was passing by perpendicular to it, would it,
Could be biphasic.
that's what I was
Absolutely. That's right. But we can't always tell that because AVL's here and maybe the signal is going this way, in which case it would be positive, and maybe that signal is going this way, in which case it would be negative, or maybe it's going exactly perpendicular, so we can't say look at AVL because the P wave will always look like this.
Okay.
But we can say that in leads 2, 3, and AVF, it should always be upright.
Yeah.
Because that is common in, I don't know,
Wish your heart's upside down.
99% of humans. Well, yeah, so 99% of humans it is going that way. And we could look at AVR, and AVR should always be negative. Though those are true statements. So we can look there and we identify if the morphology is correct in those leads. So we identify the P wave. That should take you maybe 2 seconds when it's all said and done. Shouldn't take long. You look at it, yep, all the P waves look the same. Yep, all the P waves look the same. Yep, we have the same number of P waves to QRSs. Great. Okay. Yes, I'm looking in lead 2 and they're all upright. Yes, I'm looking in AVF, they're all upright. Yes, I'm in AVR, they're all down. Those are my P waves. What's after my P waves?
PR.
Good. So then I'm looking at my PR interval. Now I do want to have the measurement. So I calipered it and found out that it was even. I take those calipers and look at the timing of it, and I remember that my PR interval should be
Less than 0.2.
not less than 0.12, or not less than 0.2. What should it be?
Between.
Between 0.12 and 0.2. That's very important.
Yeah.
It's not less than 0.2. It is between 0.12 and 0.2. Including both of those. All right? If my PR interval is less than 0.12, then the SA node is not the pacemaker site anymore. I've got something that is closer to the AV node being my pacemaker. Okay? My delay is being started sooner because it got the signal sooner. So therefore the QRS came sooner.
But somewhere in the atria.
But still somewhere in the atria because I have a P wave.
that would be considered SVT.
Well, is it? I'm not saying anything about fast. I'm just talking the PR interval itself, not how fast the QRSs are coming.
But that's where SVT could be.
Absolutely. So a lot of SVTs come from rhythms that start in the atria other than the SA node, and that could come a lot closer. That's correct. So if the PR interval is less than 0.12, I've got a pacemaker site that is either closer to the AV node or it's the AV node itself that's doing it.
Is the junction considered the AV node?
The junction is what? What is the junction?
Is the junction with all three?
What is the junction? I define the junction very specifically. Do you remember?
No.
Junction consists of two anatomical things.
Oh.
What is a junction?
Where things come
Two things
together.
meet.
And
Move, go from.
go from. So therefore, what is the junction off of that information?
So
I
we're
think
all
AV
AV.
internal pathways together
Where do they all come together at?
at the
AV
AV.
node.
Great, so that's half of a junction. What's the other half of the junction?
Where they leave.
And where do they leave from?
Bundle.
The bundle of His. So the AV node and the bundle of His is your junction. Everything converges in the AV node and it splits from the bundle of His.
Are the three internodal pathways, are they all junction in the AV node, or is it like,
Two of them
Micrometers
junction
above.
before the AV node.
okay,
There's usually two pathways into the AV, well, I'll come back to that. All of them come together in some fashion at the beginning of the AV node.
so for our purposes right now, all three atrial pathways junction at the AV node
Correct.
until further notified.
Correct, well, they junction there no matter what. What happens just before that is a rhythm that we have to talk about a little bit later. There's a few people that have an anatomical anomaly that we'll discuss.
Okay.
But all of them come to the AV node, yes, in some fashion.
All the way through the bundle until the,
And at the bundle of His, they
where they
split.
split again, so that whole section.
That's the junction.
Okay.
So the junction is the AV node and the bundle of His together. Okay. We also can have a potential bypass tract of some sort. So we discussed that in the heart, you have an atrioventricular septum. What is the atrioventricular septum?
It's between.
Split between.
Between what?
The atria and the ventricle.
The atria and the ventricles, because it's called atrioventricular. So you have a septum between the atria and the ventricles. That septum has exactly one electrical pathway through it. What is that pathway?
Bundle.
The bundle of His. AV node, bundle of His. That bundle of His is the only way that electrical activity gets through the normal heart. In some individuals, a rare number of individuals, they were born with a bypass tract outside the AV node. They were born with a separate tract that has a pathway that gets to that AV septum,
Sounds like a
Where
superpower.
does it connect to in the ventricles?
cell to cell.
This is Wolf Parkinson's White.
Wolf Parkinson's White is one example. There's a couple of examples, that's one of them.
But then it wouldn't continue
Down the normal pathway?
through the,
Correct.
okay.
So this is going cell to cell. So as the signal is traveling through the atria, cell to cell, it gets to the AV node, and what does the AV node do?
Delays.
Delays it. When that signal gets to the AV node, it's also getting through these cells to this bypass tract. What does that bypass tract do with it?
No
Doesn't
delay.
delay.
Yeah, it just goes right on through. So therefore, it gets all the way to here, and it starts going cell to cell in here, starting to depolarize part of the ventricles. Now, as that's starting to depolarize, what's happening over here?
Finally sending a signal
It's finally finished its delay, and it sends a signal. This is going cell to cell.
from the top.
This is going through its fast autorhythmic system and down to the Purkinjes. So this actually still will keep control overall, but this will have already started the process. And because that starts the process, we see that the QRS complexes start firing early, and then the rest of them fire when they're supposed to, because this process is faster than this process, even though this process starts first.
Could you saw that rhythm, please?
You bet. What would it look like? What do you think it'll look like?
So you said it will be.
A little.
Your QRS will start to do this delta thing.
Why?
It's the business loop, it's a slow route.
Why? Why will it do what you just said it's going to do?
Because the cell to cell is a lot slower, so it's still firing, it's still going towards the camera, so the camera sees that. Then all of a sudden, the bundle of His is finally getting its signal from the AV node, which fires everything, which means your vertical
Good.
track will start with the
And
QRS.
what do we know about our QRS complex if we wiped out all the autorhythmic cells of Purkinje fibers? What would it look like?
It'd be slower.
It would be slower and what would you?
Rounded.
And rounded, which is exactly right. So let's pretend this isn't here. Pretend the AV node's not there. If the AV node's not there, then the QRS complex coming from this would look like what?
Like P wave.
Slow and rounded. So this QRS complex coming from here would start looking like this. And it would start being rounded, yes? But we didn't get rid of this. It still fired, it was just delayed because it comes a little bit later. So it starts to fire right about here, right? And as soon as that happens,
It takes it up.
it takes it off. So we have this initial rounded section that cuts into the PR interval. So if I'm drawing that on a normal person, if this were going to be my normal QRS complex, I would have this in the person. And it would be rounded right there. So my PR interval would seem to be much shorter.
You can also have one on the, when you've driven a drum on the left side of the heart, you can have it on the right side of the heart too, can't you?
Yes, there are common places that we typically see those.
Outside.
There's common places that we typically see them, and where it happens to be changes which disease process it is. WPW, LGL, we'll come back to what some of those are later.
What is LGL?
And you can have.
We'll come back to some of those later as to what different conditions those might be. Don't go off on the sidetrack just yet. But just know that if they have a bypass track, no matter where it is, we're still gonna see.
And you can have a downward deflected delta wave just because of the electrical signal. So you could have a P wave, and then you have a downward delta, and then a spike in the QRS.
It depends on where that is. We don't commonly see a downward spike though, because even if it's over here, the signal is still going this direction in these
Towards
leads,
it,
in
too.
these leads. Right? You don't see a bypass track here that goes that way. You see it coming this way or coming this way, which is still positive to these leads.
That was about, no, that's my question.
Go
Me and
ahead.
Mom's were having a talk about PVCs. Can you have so normally it would be a negative deflection in lead 2. Can you have it be a positive deflection?
Yes.
If the PVC,
What does the deflection simply mean?
just the way the electricity is traveling.
That's right. So it just
Okay.
depends on where the PVC is starting from.
Okay.
If the PR interval is greater than 0.2, then it means we have some sort of an AV nodal block. Usually the AV node, it could be anywhere in the junction, obviously, it could be in the bundle of his too, but that's not common. It's commonly in the AV node, is where we normally have it. We have greater than 0.2, something is causing the AV node to delay the signal longer than the normal physiologic delay. So you'll hear that written down, you'll see that written a couple of different ways. We often call it the physiologic block. A physiologic block means the normal delay of the AV node. Physiologic means what? What does physiological mean?
No.
Yeah, it means whatever you're talking about, it means the study of life, the study of normal life, physiologic. Pathologic means what?
Disease.
The study of disease. Does that make sense? So when we say the physiologic block, we're saying the normal thing that the AV node does, which is to delay and or block the signal for a window of time.
Less than 0.2.
Less than 0.2 and
Greater than 12.
thank you. If it's greater than 0.2, then we'd say there's a pathologic block in the AV node. Something's not right about it. It's delaying longer than it's supposed to. We'll define what some of those are as we go, but it's either the physiologic block, which is normal, or the pathologic block, which is abnormal. A pathologic block will make the PR interval greater than 0.2. There'll be a longer than normal delay, or we might lose the QRS complex altogether, which we'll discuss that also. We good? So this is all in the PR interval. We want to know if the PR interval is between 0.12 and 0.20, and if it's not, we will reanalyze why a little later. And then just remember a few things. P-wave morphology and size of PR interval, there always is going to be a certain small amount of variability but it shouldn't be a great deal of variability. And differences in the shape completely have to do with differences in where that signal started from.
Are those two different shapes?
The shape is the same. These blue blocks are exactly the same size. So you see this one is fully within that block. This one is a little less tall. So a slightly different size to its amplitude because it came from a slightly different place. Right?
Are those two different patients, or would you normally get two different starts in the SA?
This is not trying to denote anything other than saying you might get different shapes based on slight differences in where things came from. So one person might have this, and one person might have that, which is why P waves are never the same in any two people. Or you might have one person where these two places are both, the SA node has two different places within it that are both pacing, and that's perfectly fine. So there might be some slight fluctuation in the P wave, things like that.
But they should be normal if it's the same person.
Should be. And then just remember all of the different things that are happening during the PR interval, right? The SA node fires just before the P wave. We can't see that, so there's no way for us to measure that, so we start our measurement at the beginning of the P wave. The atria start to depolarize, and the AV node gets the signal also. The AV node immediately does what?
Holds it.
Delays it via the, it's delaying it via, what's the term that we just used?
Physiological
During the
delay.
physiological block. So the AV node is starting its physiologic block. The atria are finishing its signal. The AV node finally finishes its physiologic block and sends it to the bundle of His. The bundle of His will then split it across the two bundle branches. The bundle branches will feed the Purkinje fibers, and the Purkinje fibers will lead to the actual contractile cells which start the QRS complex.
So, the the 1.2
0.12.
to 0.2 seconds is the time it takes for the, the
Atrium.
no, not the atrium,
Finish.
You got it.
not the muscular cells, the other cells.
Autorhythmics.
Autorhythmic cells and the ventricles to fire.
Yes, and very specifically, it's talking about that.
Okay.
If the AV node holds the signal for less of a delay, the time, so there's no delay in any of these cells. And frankly, no delay in that in any given person either, right? Because those are through, how is the signal traveling in those situations?
Gotcha.
Through gap junctions. And it'll be roughly the same every single time, because there's nothing, all it has to do with is how much ion is flooding it, and in any given one setting, you're not gonna have a change in ion concentration in that one moment. So these will all be set. So quite frankly, when we say the PR interval is 0.12 or 0.20, right? When you said, it's saying how long the AV node is actually holding onto that signal. Because these are gonna be set, this is gonna be set. So if the AV node speeds the signal through, we'll be closer to 0.12. If it takes longer, it'll be closer to 0.2.
Okay, and how long does the AV node hold on to it exactly? Or can we not
It's a
measure
range. It'll be a range based on whatever your body happens to be doing at that point in time,
Okay.
right? Because what does the sympathetic system do to the AV node?
Speeds it up,
What does the parasympathetic system do to it?
slows it down.
So if we have sympathetic involvement, we'd expect our PR intervals to be closer to here. If we have parasympathetic involvement, we'd expect it to be closer to here.
Okay, but the PR interval is not the amount of time that the AV node holds onto it.
No, it's this whole period of time,
Okay.
because we're
Okay.
including other things.
Of which we can't.
But the
tell.
fluctuation would be AV node.
The constant is everything but.
Everything else is constant,
Yeah.
in general, unless there's damage,
Right.
which we'll have to deal with when there's damage.
And we can't tell that damage, like we couldn't, if there was a longer PR interval, we necessarily can't tell by looking at an EKG whether or not it's the bundle branch or the Purkinje fibers, because those don't, there's no morphology in there that tells us that there's one specific block. We just know that there's a block
No,
from
there
that area.
is, just not in PR interval. But if we will see change, like if it's in the bundle branches, we will see specific changes on the EKG that lead us down that path that are not related to the PR interval. So as it pertains to the PR interval, we're looking at AV function, AV nodal function. If we find that the blocks are someplace else, we'll see different things in
From different
the
views.
EKGs that we'll talk about.
Okay,
Yeah,
so this is more specific to the 2, 3, and AVL
yes.
as opposed to any of the other leads. We would notice a bundle branch or his or Purkinje morphology change from a different lead.
No, don't go there. That is not an accurate statement.
Okay.
So wait till we get to that, to those bundle branches.
Calm down, Chandler.
Shut up again.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
we probably already talked about this, but I kind of forgot it. How does the AV node for the signal, it just has longer, it's like not as reactive?
We don't have,
We haven't talked about
we
that.
don't have time.
Have we talked about it though?
No, and we never will.
Okay.
I'll be happy if you really want me to.
Okay.
It's an anatomical process within the AV node itself. The AV node is a whole set of cells,
Okay.
and anatomically, how the signal has to travel through those cells,
Oh.
and the gates that are open for ions at any given time, the gates that are open
Uh-huh.
versus the gates that are closed, determine how fast a particular cell can reach its threshold.
Okay.
So within that AV node, which is a whole set of cells, sometimes we will close down channels, so it takes longer for individual cells to reach their threshold, and therefore longer for them to send the signal to the next cell.
Mhm.
And sometimes they open more channels, therefore they can reach their threshold faster and send the signal faster. So it is how the signal has to get through that mess of cells to get out the other side. And that's an anatomical thing that, quite frankly, has been the study and made the careers of many people, because that's all they do.
So if you want a career change. Maybe someday.
We good so far
We hope.
on the PR interval? We good?
Can we take a potty break?
Absolutely. Now's a good time for that.